The news from Guyana, the region and the world. Compiled in the News Talk Radio newsroom and powered by DemeraraWaves.com.
A very good day to you. With the news at this time, I am Tiana Jordan. To begin the news, here is a look at the lead stories. 2 persons have been jointly charged today in relation to the alleged murder committed on Dr. Colin Roach on November 2, 2021. 7 staff members of the Guyana City Council's Treasurer's Department have been fired for alleged gross misconduct. Canada's High Commissioner to Guyana, Mark Berman, has told members of the Guyana Police Force that the scourge of gender-based violence must not appear to be normalized. In regional news, the Sugar Association of the Caribbean has commended the Belize government for taking Trinidad and Tobago to the Caribbean Court of Justice for allegedly failing to comply with its obligations under the Treaty of Chaguaramas that governs the regional integration movement. And internationally, the European Commission has accused Belarus's authoritarian leader of luring migrants with the false promise of easy entry to the EU as part of an inhumane gangster-style approach. The details of these and other stories in just a moment.
Not seeing returns on your dollar? Then advertise with News Talk Radio Guyana 103.1 FM and see results. We give you competitive rates, wide coverage, appealing programs, streaming online worldwide on dem waves, and we give you value for your money. You'll see returns when you advertise with us. Call our helpful staff today on 223-1056 or 223-1041 for those competitive rates. 103.1 FM, accurate information blended with great music.
And now the news in detail. 2 persons have been jointly charged today in relation to the alleged murder committed on Dr. Colin Roach on November 2, 2021. Police say the duo, 18-year-old Lenrick Bias and 19-year-old Hilton Oliver Jr. Franklin, were charged jointly for the offense of murder in the course of or furtherance of a robbery. The accused, Bias and Franklin, appeared at the Georgetown Magistrates Court before Chief Magistrate Anne McLennan, where the indictable charge was read to both of them. They were not required to plead and were both remanded to prison until November 30, 2021 for report. The 2 murder accused were both arrested by the police on November 5, 2021. Lenrick Bias is an unemployed 18-year-old male of Lot 282 Good Intent Village, West Bank, Demerara, and Hilton Franklin is a 19-year-old taxi driver of Lot 27 Best Village, West Coast, Demerara. 7 staff members of the Georgetown City Council's Treasurer's Department have been fired for alleged gross misconduct. The Local Government Commission says the decision was made unanimously to summarily dismiss the workers. According to the Commission, the decision was taken on October 26th. Those dismissed are 3 clerks, 2 cashiers, and 2 tax collection officers who are also supervisors. The Local Government Commission says it decided to dismiss the workers because they allegedly participated in fraud. The Commission also decided to revert the acting City Treasurer, Mr. John Douglas, to his substantive position of accounting manager and appointed Ms. Edwana Miller to perform the acting duties of City Treasurer. Canada's High Commissioner to Guyana, Mark Berman, has told members of the Guyana Police Force that the scourge of gender-based violence must not appear to be normalized. The High Commissioner to Guyana was this morning delivering feature remarks at a Marundoy-sponsored gender-based violence training at the Police Training Center, Ivlery. Mr. Berman implored the ranks to not allow the scourge to become normal.
Law enforcement capacity building is a key pillar in this fight, and it's a pleasure to partner and to be here this morning. You are one of the front-line defense for victims and their families. Too often violence against women and girls is normalized and goes unpunished. That can't be allowed to happen. We are all here today because we know about the high rates of sexual and gender-based violence. An estimated 1 in 3 women, we've heard higher, globally experience physical or sexual abuse in her lifetime, most often by an intimate partner.
High Commissioner Berman presents grim statistics to show the extent of suffering which is compounded by the COVID pandemic globally, and highlighted the need of teamwork to end the societal scourge.
Around 120 million girls worldwide have experienced forced intercourse or other forced sexual acts during their lives. And the COVID-19 pandemic has only exacerbated gender-based violence. It is inflicting devastating familial effects, and its impacts are reverberating well beyond the immediate family. It has a profound impact on the economic, public health, security, and social sectors. It is therefore imperative that as partners, we continue to work with the governments and non-governmental organizations such as Marundoy to help eliminate and mitigate the scourge of violence and threats of violence against all.
The training was facilitated by Marundoy through a grant from Canada to train ranks of the Guyana Police Force on how to treat cases of gender-based violence. The Ministry of Human Services and Social Security also participated in the training and has a parallel training, COP 2000, aimed at training 2,000 ranks across Guyana to handle domestic violence cases. Former President David Granger wants Guyana to send the border dispute with Suriname over the New River Triangle to the World Court for settlement. He says that he is confident Suriname will lose if the case is taken to the International Court of Justice, ICJ. He expressed little hope in the Border Commission that was set up to resolve the issue, but the commission is now defunct for decades. Speaking on his weekly public interest program, the former president called on Suriname to refrain from issuing threats of force to acquire the New River Triangle, some 15 square kilometers of Guyana's territory bordering Suriname.
So this is my message. The big problem between Guyana and Suriname is the question of territorial sovereignty. The second big problem is Suriname's threat, the actual use of force against Guyana. And we call on Suriname to refrain from threatening to use force or from actually using force in an attempt to get territory which does not belong to them. Guyana will not give up 1 square centimeter of territory.
The former president, on his weekly public interest show, said that the recent inquiries by the media on possible discussion between President Irfan Ali and President Chandrika Prasad Santokhi following his visit to Guyana is a cause for concern. Mr. Granger also cited the issue of a section of Suriname calling for the New River Triangle issue to be sorted before bridging the Quarantine River. Health Minister Dr. Frank Anthony says Guyana is working on revising its laws on suicide. The health minister was at the time addressing a stakeholder conference on mental health in Guyana to devise a plan of action for suicide prevention. The minister says while the laws on suicide have changed in most countries, Guyana's outdated law still remains but needs revising.
Over the last couple of months, however, I've spoken to my colleague at the Attorney General's office, Mr. Nandalal, and we have been able to do a draft suicide prevention bill. And hopefully we could get that on the parliamentary agenda. And if we do this year, then we will be able to pass it and change those old things that have been there that does not really create an enabling environment in how what we need to do to prevent suicide in Guyana.
In addition to revised suicide laws, the health minister told the forum that Guyana will be depending on a review done by the Pan American Health Organization, PAHO, to formulate a more responsive suicide plan.
And therefore, from the review that PAHO has done, we would like to also now work with stakeholders to develop a new plan going forward from 2021 to 2026. But this one, we want to make sure that we use it, because if we don't, we'll just be, not impacting the problem. That the new plan that we'll be developing next year, that we will be able to get something that is more responsive to the types of challenges that we have before us.
Guyana's law will be tailored to allow for sampling using newer technology. The conference has listed using genes from saliva.
One of the studies would be doing some interesting thing, collecting saliva, and that perhaps would be added to do some examination of, or looking for a gene that might be associated with suicide. On another piece of legislation that we're working on, we're also going to put new rules in place regarding biobanking. And that one, hopefully, we'll be able to get that through Parliament shortly as well. So it deals with transplantation of tissue and also create new rules for biobanking.
The Conference on Mental Health in Guyana is facilitated by the University of Guyana in collaboration with the Columbus University and their suicide experts and other stakeholders, along with the Ministry of Health Guyana. And now in regional news. The Sugar Association of the Caribbean, SAC, has commended the Belize government for its decision to go before the Trinidad-based Caribbean Court of Justice, CCJ, alleging that Trinidad and Tobago failed to comply with its obligations under the Treaty of Chaguaramas that governs the regional integration movement, CARICOM. According to Loop News, the SAC chairman, Carl James, says the case was not primarily about compensation, but about ensuring that protections set out in the treaty and reinforced by numerous decisions of COTAD, Council of Trade and Economic Development, are abided by. He added that otherwise, the CARICOM's single market and economy would have very little relative value for any of its members. Under the revised Treaty of Chaguaramas, CARICOM states are required to impose a 40% Common External Tariff, CET, on brown sugar imported from sources outside the Caribbean region. Belize contends that it has evidence to demonstrate that between November 2018 to June 2020, brown sugar which was produced outside the Caribbean region entered the Trinidad and Tobago market without the 40% CET being imposed. Trinidad and Tobago has denied that it has permitted the importation of extra-regional brown sugar from any extra-regional territory without the imposition of the 40% CET. Last week, the CCJ, which sat in its original jurisdiction, which is an international court with exclusive jurisdiction to interpret and apply the rules set out in the CARICOM Treaty and to decide disputes arising under it, heard the arguments on the matter and has reserved its judgment to a later date. The SAC says that over the last 3 years, it has repeatedly raised its concerns about the practice that has drastically diluted the value and demand of the CARICOM market for regional sugar producers. It says that the attorneys representing the Belize government provided evidence of more than 4,000 metric tons of sugar imported without any record of CET being paid. The almost $190 million in pay packets by the end of September included more than $3 million for people in temporary posts like the COVID-19 Monitoring Unit and Department of Public Affairs, but the Ministry of Finance in Barbados says the overall expenditure was about $3 million less than budgeted for. The Barbados Nation reports that the money spent on wages and salaries, as outlined in the government's mid-year budget review report, April to September 2021, was part of an overall $84 million increase in expenditure when compared with the same period last year. Students in several parts of Antigua and Barbuda are left stranded as bus drivers of the government's public transportation services refuse to work. According to reports by the Antigua newsroom, school bus drivers and conductors are refusing to operate vehicles in rebellion against recent human resource changes at the Antigua Barbuda Transport Board. A former central bank governor of Barbados has given strategies by Barbados and other nations a failing grade handling and controlling the COVID-19 pandemic. Barbados Today News reported that former central bank governor Dr. Delisle Worrell, in his economic letter for November, said that initiatives aimed at overcoming today's major challenges of the pandemic are not working. Using a summary of the main themes from the recent International Banking Seminar organized by the Group of 30 as his point of reference, Dr. Worrell says the new equilibrium for the world economy and society is far from where nations are now. Dr. Worrell says a new agenda was needed for the International Monetary Fund and other international financial institutions, and the United Nations and its agencies must be reformed in a fundamental way. The senior economist suggested that countries were failing on addressing climate change, biodiversity and species extinction, poverty and inequality, as well as access to health, education, sanitation and basic services. He says the pledges that have been made with respect to every challenge are insufficient, arguing that most countries have not taken the concrete actions needed to fulfill their pledges on schedule. Dr. Worrell also stated that the poor are expected to share the burden with the rich, even though that makes the elimination of absolute poverty an impossibility. He suggested that the IMF and the World Bank need new agendas because the ones which came into force when they were established after World War II to protect currency values in terms of the US dollar standard and to mobilize finance for the reconstruction of war-ravaged economies are no longer relevant today. Dr. Worrell believes the IMF and World Bank should be tasked with pulling together the best estimates of the funding required for initiatives that are required to meet long-term targets, broken down to show what has to be attained stage by stage to stay on course. And internationally, the latest coming from the BBC World Service.
Hello, I'm Debbie Russ with the BBC News. The European Union says it will impose additional sanctions on Belarus because of its treatment of migrants at the border with Poland. The European Commission says there are about 2,000 people at the border trying to enter the EU. Poland's Deputy Foreign Minister, Marcin Przydacz, accused Belarus of encouraging the migrants to come from the Middle East.
They were accommodated in state-owned hotels, transported towards the border and encouraged to cross illegally the border. It has nothing to do with lack of dialogue or any kind of agreements as said by Minsk. It is a pure hybrid operation conducted by the Belarusian regime.
Belarus denies facilitating illegal border crossings. The UN called for an end to the use of vulnerable people as political pawns. The US industrial conglomerate General Electric is to split into 3 companies. GE was co-founded in the late 1800s by the inventor Thomas Edison and was America's largest firm by market value until the financial crisis. From New York, here's Michelle Fleury.
The 129-year-old company that invented thousands of products and in the process changed American life is undergoing a major transformation. General Electric plans to split its business into 3 standalone companies focused on aviation, healthcare and energy. The company said it aims to spin off the healthcare business in early 2023. The separation of its renewable energy and power businesses will take place in early 2024. It is the latest effort by the company to simplify its business and reduce its massive debt load.
Chile's lower house of Congress has voted by the slimmest majority to proceed with an impeachment trial of President Sebastián Piñera over corruption allegations, which appeared in recent leaked documents known as the Pandora Papers. Katie Watson reports.
It took nearly 22 hours of debating in the Chamber of Deputies. In the end, MPs gathered the 78 votes needed to seek impeachment over President Piñera's alleged involvement in the sale of a mining company. Allegations over the transfer of the mine in northern Chile were investigated and dismissed by a court 4 years ago. But following the publication of the Pandora Papers, the prosecution decided to open a new investigation. The vote comes just 2 weeks before Chile's presidential elections, the opposition ratcheting up the pressure ahead of the vote. Piñera, who will not be running, has rejected the accusations.
South Korea is to send a military aircraft to Australia to collect thousands of litres of a desperately needed chemical solution. Shortages of the additive, made from urea and used in diesel engines to reduce air pollution, are threatening both transport and industry. Lorry drivers warn that deliveries could halt if they don't get the chemical solution. World News from the BBC. People who choose not to be vaccinated for COVID in Singapore will, from next month, have to pay for their own treatment if they catch the disease. The government said it was an important signal to those refusing to be jabbed. The city-state reported nearly 2,500 new infections on Monday. A Serbian human rights organisation is starting legal action against the country's government after it was banned from painting over a mural of a Bosnian Serb war criminal. The Youth Initiative for Human Rights had planned to mark today's International Anti-Fascism Day by painting over a depiction of General Ratko Mladic. He's currently serving a life sentence in The Hague for war crimes. The Congolese military says it has retaken areas of North Kivu province that were overrun by rebels on Sunday night. The attacks caused thousands of people to flee across the Ugandan border. The Congolese authorities blamed the violence on remnants of the M23 rebel group. In the past, the Congolese government has accused Rwanda of backing and sheltering M23 rebels. The government in the Indian capital Delhi has said it will introduce what it calls game-changing steps to try to deal with hazardous pollution levels. Electra Naismith has the details.
Delhi's Environment Minister has announced a month-long campaign to tackle the burning of rubbish and crop stubble, a major contributor to the capital's poor air quality. Farm fires in neighbouring states on Monday reached a season's high. Other measures include the spraying of biosolutions that turn stubble into manure, water sprinkling for dust and efforts to tackle vehicle emissions. Pollution worsens in October and November as crop fires and vehicle exhausts get trapped in the cool, slow-moving air above Delhi for longer. Ministers promise action each year to battle the smog. Critics are already describing these measures as face-saving rhetoric.
And that's the latest BBC News.
And now to end the news, here is a recap of the leads. 2 persons have been jointly charged today in relation to the alleged murder committed on Dr. Colin Roach on November 2nd, 2021. 7 staff members of the Georgetown City Council's Treasurer's Department have been fired for alleged misconduct. Canada's High Commissioner to Guyana, Mark Berman, has told members of the Guyana Police Force that the scourge of gender-based violence must not appear to be normalized. In regional news, the Sugar Association of the Caribbean has commended the Belize government for taking Trinidad and Tobago to the Caribbean Court of Justice for allegedly failing to comply with its obligations under the Treaty of Chaguaramas that governs the regional integration movement. And internationally, the European Commission has accused Belarus's authoritarian leader of luring migrants with the false promise of easy entry to the EU as part of an inhumane gangster-style approach. And that's the end of the news.
This has been the news, compiled in the News Talk Radio newsroom. For ongoing updates, visit demerarawaves.com, and you can check facebook.com/demwaves and twitter.com/demwaves.
News Talk Radio Guyana is the station for you, bringing you news updates every hour, major news 3 times a day, edutainment on a higher level, shows like Beat the Clock, Brunch on the Coast, The Afternoon Jam, Youth's Perspective. It's a station that goes wherever you go, streaming online at www.bit.ly/newstalk1031. It's News Talk Radio Guyana 103.1 FM.